This is the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. Welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, where we guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Eric Huey, and multiple times a month, we bring you interviews from high-performing millennials who are challenging perceptions and changing expectations of our generation. Our mission is to help you overcome fear, take action, and go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's time to start preparing now, mainly because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, which will create a vacuum of career opportunities that you've been waiting for. Will you be ready? Joel, welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.
Eric, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I appreciate your time today. I think anyone who is watching on video instantly knows who you are, especially if they're based in Kansas City. But if you could just go ahead and tell viewers, who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Joel Goldberg. I guess nowadays I'm a lot of things, but first and foremost, besides being a husband and a father, I'm a baseball broadcaster. So I have for the last 12 seasons, so late start in 2020, 13th season with Royals baseball. I host every pregame show on TV, every postgame show on TV. Usually I'm not allowed to wear a hat or anything like that. It's the beauty of podcasts like this. There's usually not a dress code, but throw on a suit or a nice polo and talk about baseball and do that every single night. It's not a bad gig. And when I'm not doing that, I'm doing a lot of corporate speaking, virtual speaking, and podcasting.
Talk a little bit about your why. Why do what you do?
It's really interesting, Eric, because that's a question that I don't think that I answered or even knew to answer until a few years ago. I mean, I think we're all nowadays searching for that why, maybe even more so when you have this time in a pandemic. But, I always thought my why was just living my dream. And my dream from the time I was a little kid was to talk about sports on TV. And so I lived that. But it's really not a why. I mean, that's certainly something that makes it amazing and have to pinch yourself. But what I came to realize over the year was my why was our ability in sports to provide a diversion or a distraction from people in life, to let them, whether it be forget about what's troubling them or just entertain them. The games happen. We're able to bring that to people's living rooms, to their family rooms, to their bedrooms, overseas, to hospital beds. And when I started hearing from more people over the years, especially when the Royals were really winning championships and all of that, the way it impacted lives, the way it brought people together. So I get to be a small part of that. That's the why, is the ability to help people and bring them joy. And then the flip side of that is, if that ability to give people a few hours on a regular basis just to get away from the grind. Mm-hmm. The speaking really is taking the lessons learned from those athletes and from that world that I'm in, and bringing that to people to help make their lives better long term.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. The way we met is actually very appropriate for today's topic in terms of networking, using the people you're around, putting people first, your relationships first, to create success in business. I usually interview millennials, on the podcast, but you've been a great mentor and to me, even in just the few times that we've had the chance to interact. So I appreciate your time. Before we get into the topic, I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the Royals.
Yeah.
My buddies and my brothers would all beat me up if they saw I posted an interview with Joel and no Royals discussion was had. So just a few questions on that. First one just being, what are some of your favorite memories from all these years of broadcasting with the Royals?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously winning a world championship, that type of stuff it goes without saying. So much of it to me, and I think people will understand this. I mean, you just talked about, our connecting and the networking aspect of things. So much to me is about the people and less about the plays or the moments. So even if you look at in 2020, the first time as a Royals broadcaster for me in 13 years that we're not traveling.
Yeah.
the amount of people that I've met, the restaurant owner, the usher, the guy that owns the breakfast place in Cleveland, the usher in Chicago that always gives you the fist bump, the umpires in the locker room, the elevator operator. And so to me, it's more about the people that you meet, not just our fans. But of course, there have been specific moments. There have been ridiculous games. I mean, the Royals scoring, I think, 9 runs in the 9th inning against the White Sox, and me being out on our left field set, knowing that I wouldn't be doing an on-field interview, and suddenly having that, I think I need to get headed back that direction. Which way do I go? I mean, I have a million stories like that, but specific moments, the wild card game, even before that, Salvador Perez catching a pop-up to end a game on a Friday night in late September of 2014 in Chicago to clinch the first playoff berth in 29 years. And you could just, being there on the south side of Chicago, and there were a lot of Royals fans that came up for the weekend. It was an electric feeling. But, I've got a lifetime's worth of them.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing those. Speaking of salvi, what's maybe one of your favorite salvi splashes, and what's one of your least less fond salvi splashes?
Well, it's never really, there's never a least fond unless it's cold out.
Right.
I tend to move quicker when it's colder out. I'm getting older. We're all getting older, but those guys, I always say those guys are younger. They're in great shape. They're top of the line athletes, best baseball players in the world. I'm not going to win any battle of, running away from them. But if I could anticipate and get out of the way, I move quicker when it's cold out. I'll pull a hamstring at some point, I'm sure. But I think I have a good and a bad, or a favorite and not a least favorite. They both end up being phenomenal stories. One was just, there was a year, I don't even remember the circumstances, that it was my birthday. I almost feel like it was a Friday night. I might be wrong. No, I don't know that there were fireworks after. Then I would have made the whole thing up like, hey, there was fireworks for my birthday. But there was a big crowd. I mean, it had to have been somewhere around 15 or 16, I'm guessing. It was a big crowd. Maybe it was a weekend. I don't know. And I had Eric Hosmer and Salvi came out with the splash, and they did the splash, and then they helped lead the crowd in a serenade of happy birthday to me. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, really, this stuff isn't supposed to be about me. I'm the one that is caught in the middle of it, and I really tried my best to make it about them. If they want to dunk the bucket on me and it becomes about me, that's their choice. Yeah. I've never asked Salvi to do a splash on anyone. I've never coordinated with him. My feeling, even when people say, well, how come there wasn't a splash? Look, I don't consult with him. It's his deal, and I just happen to be the guy in the middle of it, which is an amazing thing. The flip side is, there was a lot of years ago in Seattle, where we're on a long road trip. So, for a 10-game road trip, you might pack 3 to 4 coats. You're not going to pack 10 shirts. You're going to pack 10 ties, all this stuff. And 5 or 6 pair of pants. You might use the dry cleaner at some point. And it was like one of the first days of the trip. And for whatever reason, Salvi decided, I don't remember who I was interviewing, that instead of bringing the Gatorade bucket out, he would take 4 cups of Gatorade that had blue in it, and he tosses it. You cannot escape droplets flying in every single direction. And my lighter shirt or coat or whatever it was just dotted in blue.
Oh, man.
And I still had a long ways on this trip to go, and I needed multiple uses, perhaps within like the next 2 days or something like that. And so I said something to the PR guy, a longtime vice president of the Royals, and I said, hey, we just let Salvi know, like, can we stick to the Gatorade bucket? And he has held that over my head to this day. Like, and Joel complained 2 times, and I'm like, it was once, first of all, and second of all. But it's a fun gig. There was a really good one where Drew Butera came in with the backup catcher from the bullpen, because he'd been warming someone up, so never saw it, and I just covered. And the next day, Drew came in and said, hey, how much is your dry cleaning? I want to pay for it.
That's awesome.
And I told him at that point, I have a great deal with this will be my one NASCAR moment. I have a great deal with Hangers Dry Cleaners, and they take care of everything for me. So I'm like, you're off the hook, you're good. But yeah, one final thought on it, Eric, and this one's important to me, is as much as everyone asked me about the Salvi splash, and it took me a while to realize that very rarely does someone say, hey, I love that question you asked last night, or I love that answer, because they're so distracted by the shiny object.
Yeah.
But this salvi splash, which, I don't think we won't see it this year. We didn't see it last year because he was hurt. This year, pandemic, but distancing and all that, it brings people together. Like, as corny as it might sound, I will, especially on a weekend night, I'll look up in the stands and people stay in their seats just to watch that moment.
Yeah.
And people are connected, perhaps more with Salvador Perez than any Royal, a guy that does not speak perfect English,
Yeah.
that sometimes people will say to me, I couldn't quite even understand everything he said, but yet everybody adores him because of the personality, because the infectious joy that he brings people.
Yeah.
And so for me to be a part of that, I think it's part of the culture that we have here in Kansas City because it unites people. And I never thought about that when it started, but there's some why there for me too.
To drill down to our topic today about relationships leading to success in your career and in business. You've also obviously had a great career in sports broadcasting, public speaking. So I guess what's your general strategy in building relationships and peer network, if you will?
Yeah, it's by the way, am I the first ever Gen Xer on this show?
I don't think so. We did a mentor
Okay.
month back in
All right.
May of this year, so I had a couple other mentor
All right.
figures on as well.
All right. All right. Just curious if I
Yeah.
was the oldest guy. But I'd like to say that I have 25 plus years of networking experience, and I do. I just don't always think I knew that that's what I was doing. And the more I've come to understand it, the more effective I believe I've become at all of those roles. I, without knowing it, I think I took a crash course in networking as a 22-year-old kid. And to this day, I don't think that anybody told me, like, they don't teach you in school networking. I don't think. I mean, I don't remember anything in journalism classes. I don't think, do they teach you networking in a business class or a marketing class or whatever? I mean, these are life skills that I actually would think would be a great class, because everyone, introverts, extroverts, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, executives, the janitor, whoever it is, like, we all need those people skills, no matter what we do. You don't have to be in sales. And I'm 22. Now, keep in mind, this is the time, 1994, where email just started. I mean, I remember graduating from the University of Wisconsin, and we could use email if you went to the college library I don't remember how it worked, but that's the only way you could do it. Right. And so there weren't websites and YouTube and all that. And so I think I subscribed to some phone service, and we didn't have cell phones either. And it was an 800 number that you had a passcode to, because you paid $50 a month or whatever, seemed like a lot of money. And you could get information every day of new TV jobs that were opening up around the country. So you'd get the information, you'd hit the code, it'd give you, the address and, who to send it to. And you'd put a label on a actual physical tape, and you'd ship it in the mail with a resume and hope you got it. And I don't know what the numbers were, but by June of 1994, I had every single submission I had came back with a rejection. Wow. And again, nobody told me to do it. I don't think. Maybe it was just a survival. I've got to get to my dream. But I just started picking up the phone and randomly calling TV stations around the country that were not a Chicago-sized market where I grew up, or a Philadelphia-sized market where I lived before that, or even a Kansas City or St. Louis. I mean, I started calling stations in Columbia, Missouri, in Jeff City, in Mason City, Iowa, Rochester, Minnesota. Rochester, New York was a bigger one. Peoria, Illinois, Terre Haute, Indiana, Utica, New York, on and on. And I would just call the receptionist and I'd say, "Can you tell me the name of your news director?" And she'd say, "Sure, it's Joe Smith." And I'd say, "Thank you." I'd hang up and I'd wait like the obligatory 10 minutes so she wouldn't recognize my voice, and I'd call back. And then I would say, "Hi, Mr. Smith. My name is Joel Goldberg. I just graduated from the University of Wisconsin. I'm looking for a broadcasting job. I understand you might not have one, but I just happen to be passing through Terre Haute a week from Friday. If I popped in and dropped off the tape, could I meet you?" And the response 9 out of 10 times would be yes. The worst case was just drop it off. I'm not sure if I'll be here. I was never going to those cities, but as soon as they said yes, and this, I'm not a cold calling type at all. Like I say this, like, this was very out of my comfort zone. And so I hopped in the car with the one sport coat I had hanging in the back, and I'd, run into a McDonald's or something and change, and I'd walk in. And sometimes these meetings would turn into 45-minute, 1 hour tours of the station, introduce me to other people, reviewing my resume tape. And so I started building this database in a 3-ring binder of just handwritten notes of who I met and the date I sent a thank you note, almost like my own spreadsheet. And I'm not an organized person either. And by October, I've been hired to work at a TV station in northern Wisconsin, small town. Within the next couple of months, 2 or 3 others reached out, said, hey, we finally have an opening for you. So I had started to build these relationships, and essentially what I did was I moved to the front of the line. I was no better than anyone else.
Yeah.
So that was my early understanding, that you have to figure out a way to connect with people. Once I learned how to do that with athletes and stop being like, oh my gosh, that's Barry Bonds, that's Mark McGwire, that's Albert Pujols, that's Marshall Falk. Once I understood to treat them like normal people, which took me a long time, then that networking, even though we don't call it networking in sports, that's where the trust started to build.
Yeah. It sounds like being a very proactive mindset and knowing what you want before you get there.
It changes everything. It really does, I think.
Yeah. Can you point to specific scenarios or times in your life, your career, that relationship has benefited you when you need something in a jam or seeking a certain contact at a certain team or industry, anything like that?
It happens. I think in some ways it happens every day. I mean, from a baseball standpoint, word of mouth gets around. Guys will talk. I mean, if the media gets a bad label, and we're not looked upon quite as poorly in the sports world, but there's something about being with the group all the time. And so, when a guy turns to a teammate and says, yeah, or an opponent, yeah, he's okay. Yeah, no, he'll be a good one. So, I mean, really the big one for me was just Albert Pujols, and it took me 7 years. I worked in St. Louis before Kansas City, and it took me 7 years to earn his trust. I'd gone about it all wrong. I just didn't know how to do it. And because he so often told me no for requests I made, I, wasn't too fond of him. And I mean, he was the emerging greatest player in baseball, and then became the greatest player in baseball. And I'm, living under the same roof, so to speak, with him. And I can't seem to leverage that. Yeah. And once I understood how to take that wall down between us and make it more personal and seek out his advice, because what was happening in 2007 is I knew I had this opportunity to move to Kansas City. It was going to be a better job, more responsibility. And I knew he had gone to high school and in junior college here. And so I sought out his opinion and pulled him aside one day, said, no interview, no camera. We went down to the batting cage, visiting batting cage in Houston at whatever Minute Maid Park was called at that point. And he gave me advice on Kansas City as a town to live in, and then actually even offered for me to buy his house. I had to let him know that we don't make the same amount of money. He then asked if I wanted to rent it, which we should have, because it would have been an even greater story. But that day forward, we built a relationship because I had asked for his trust in not telling other people. And I think he took that responsibility, and he took that in a way that, as much as I looked up to him as the greatest player in baseball, I don't know that I ever looked up to him as a human being or expressed that. And now I wasn't asking for something in terms of an interview. I was just asking for his advice and his opinion. And I think that meant something to him. And it meant something to him to not share that and to keep that secret. And so when I did get the job and he's taking me out to lunch, and now over the years that starts leading to one-on-one interviews. And so to answer your question, I would have people, and Albert will do interviews, but he's happy not doing them too. And so I suddenly had people looking at, wow, how did you get that? Even people within the Angels organization saying, hey, that's pretty impressive. And so it gave me a lot of credibility. And even now, over the years, I've seen some of our young players, young Dominican players that just want to meet him. I'm like, well, I'll introduce you if you want. They're nervous.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, wait, I get a little bit of, if I make that connection for you, you start respecting me. It's the good old networking game. Mm-hmm. So million stories like that. That's kind of the signature one because he's one of the top 2 or 3 greatest players of our lifetime.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Thanks for sharing that. And other conversations we've had, we talked about the degrees of separation idea. I think that the number right now is 6 degrees of separation from anyone in the world, and I think it's evident, and probably even fewer just based on what we've talked about. If I wanted to meet Albert Pujols or something like that. So, what's your take on that? Being in the sports world, do you think it's more or less than that 6 degrees amount?
I think it's less, and I think it's less just in the social media world.
Yeah.
Like let's take, for instance, someone famous outside of the sports world. And by the way, everything that I said is really applied to how I've built my speaking career. It's meet this person, which leads to 5 more people.
Yep.
How did you and I meet? How did you start to build a family tree here, and you see all the different branches that that come from it. So to me, I just, it's less than 6. Take someone like a Simon Sinek or someone with millions of followers on social media. There's a pretty good chance that I know someone or know someone that knows someone who knows him.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to get through the gatekeeper.
Right.
And that becomes the challenge, because what I start to see now is a lot of people will see if they can get to someone through me, and we all do that. Hey, would you be able to introduce, can you do, which I think that if we're connectors, we all want to do, we all should do. It's paying it forward. It's what makes the world go round. The challenge becomes, I'll give you this example. I do a lot with the Negro Leagues. Their president, Bob Kendrick, is one of the most dynamic storytellers on the planet, in my opinion. And so I've had him on my show. I'm on both of my podcasts, and between promoting the museum, campaigns they have going on and on and on. So they just released a new clothing line, or another company released a new clothing line with money going to the Negro Leagues, and it's really sharp. It looks great. I think it's a company out east, and the person has this joint venture with them is CC Sabathia. Be a huge grab for me. I don't know CC. He might recognize me if he saw me. We've had a couple conversations over the years, but yeah. I just, it's not like it's, hey, what's up, Joel, or anything like that. It would take a lot of effort for me to really let him know who I am in the right context. So I texted Bob, not saying, can you give me CC's number, but hey, what would be the right way to go about trying to get CC or someone from this show, someone from this clothing apparel place on to promote the Negro League Museum? So he gave me the contact from the clothing place. He gave me CC's publicist, said go through CC's publicist to set up doing it. I don't know yet. I'll send something in the next day or two. I'll probably get the rejection on it.
Yeah.
But there's a gatekeeper there. I mean, CC Sabathia should be harder to get to.
Sure.
And just because, and this is just a little bit of advice, I guess, for everyone, just because I have that connection with Bob Kendrick, and he is 1 degree, so I am 2 degrees from CC Sabathia. If CC Sabathia could get a hold of, say, Barack Obama, I'm 3 degrees potential. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's obviously not that easy. So it's less than 6, especially for someone like me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to get there. And I also need to understand that I want to make sure that I don't put Bob Kendrick in a spot where he has to make an ask for something that then takes his credibility or takes away his equity with CC, so that when he needs to ask CC for a favor for the museum and Bob's burned it on me,
yeah,
that doesn't make anyone look good. So, look, if it's the end all be all and this is the interview of a lifetime and I finally am going to go all in for it, but you have to be able to weigh it. And that's what I do with the athletes every single day. Hey, I'd love to really be able to grab Alex Gordon right now, but he looks like he's super busy. And do I want to burn my reputation on slowing him down from what he needs to do? And that to me is networking 101 or maybe 201 at that point, of really reading people and understanding when you're working with those 6 degrees of separation, what that does for everyone else involved. And back, Eric, to that story I said I about Albert Pujols, I touched base with him a few years ago, 2 years ago, in the locker room, and I said, I have a confession to make. You used to scare the living heck out of me, and he kind of got embarrassed and he started blushing, and he said, you know what? Everybody wants something from me, but once I trust you, I'll do anything for you. And so therein lies the lesson. Like, don't So many of us are guilty of putting the cart before the horse.
2 questions to wrap us up. One, what people, books, or resources have made an impact on your life or your business?
So many. And I always feel like I'm reading 15 books at once.
Yeah.
So I'm all over the place. I'm, terrible attention span. But I certainly, the guy, I'll put it this way, the guy who is on my Twitter alerts, non-sports related, is Simon Sinek. I mentioned his name before.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really say what, but and he doesn't know, he wouldn't know who I am at all. But there may be an opportunity, and I hope promote the heck out of this if it happens, for me to moderate a virtual event this fall that he would be involved in.
Oh, wow.
That's about the most I could say. That it's not my event, but I'm hoping that happens, because that would be, obviously pretty unbelievable. The book that I always go back to, and it's not really a sports book, but it kind of is The Soul of Baseball, written by Joe Posnanski. I've read that 3 times, and it just always sits on my nightstand. He followed around with Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro Leagues. He followed around, and I think it was 2005, Buck O'Neill throughout the country for a year. And the life lessons and the perspective in there are just off the charts. And that's one that I just always like to think about on a regular basis. And then, there's obviously great leadership stuff out there. I mean, anything from like a Jocko Willink to on and on and on. I mean, it's, I think a lot of us are reading the same books, and they are powerful. You can learn from them all the time. And so I'm trying to, between podcasts, between Audible, between, any moment that you have.
Yeah, most
TED
definitely.
Talks.
Yep. All good resources for sure. Lastly, where can people get a hold of you authentically, as we've been talking about today, if they want to book you for speaking or ask for career advice, anything like that?
Yeah. Social media is always a great way to reach out. So LinkedIn, pretty easy to find there. There's content every day too. LinkedIn and Twitter are probably my 2 most active. Instagram, I think for me, I don't message as much on there. But my website, joelgoldbergmedia.com. And then for an email, info@joelgoldbergmedia.com. Between the website and the info@joelgoldbergmedia.com, great way to book or even have a conversation about events. And, doing a lot of virtual right now. And which is pretty unbelievable that you can wrap up a meeting and 1 minute later be in front of an audience.
Right.
And that's where we're at. So those are the best places. And, the speaking is year round and obviously picks up in the off season, but and I should just say real quick in wrapping up that the speech is really, it's not a baseball speech, but you'll get plenty of baseball. And certainly I'll always answer any baseball questions, but I don't want to go to an audience and just give them a state of the Royals. So it's all about culture and team building and leadership and, and connectivity and all of those things that make for successful teams.
All right. We'll link to all those connections there that you've mentioned, Joel, in our show notes for anyone who's listening or watching and interested in connecting with you. But Joel, really appreciate your time today, all the great stories and insights. It's been great to catch up. That wraps up today's episode. We hope to have brought you some valuable key takeaways. Most importantly, whatever you learned, take action on it. Apply it to your life. Apply it to your career. Motivation and inspiration only come as a result of taking that first step. So if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe on whichever platform you found the show. You can also follow us on all the major social media platforms or contact us directly at genwhyleaders@gmail.com. That's GENWHY leaders@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Huey, and thanks for listening to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.